Have you ever wondered what to do with leftover epoxy after you're done with a project? Well, in my case, I just keep small canvases around. That way I can quickly do a pour with whatever leftover epoxy I have. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a beach canvas with leftover epoxy. So the first thing I do is I have a canvas ready with the base coat. And for this one, since I'm doing a beach, I'm using beach colors as the base coat. Now what I use for the base coat is spray paint, but you can use acrylic paints, you can use latex paints, any of those would work. But I like using spray paints because it's a lot quicker, but it does take a while to dry. I normally wait 24 hours before I do a pour on it, so that way it has enough time to dry. On here, I already pour a little bit of epoxy towards the top where it resembles the sand and the water ends. And now I'm just mixing white pigment into the epoxy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour thin lines towards the edge. And then I'm doing another line a little bit behind that. And this resembles the waves. So I just spread it out with my fingers a little bit. And the second step to this is I get spray paint and I spray it on a stick. And then after that, I just slowly drag it just where I did those thin white lines. What I just did here is I sprayed rubbing alcohol, which makes the paint spread out into cells and it makes it look more realistic. So now I'm just getting ready to pour the second half of the canvas. So I tinted it blue so that way it blends in with the back half of the canvas where it resembles the deep end of the sea. Since I'm using leftover epoxy from another project that I was working on, I'm doing my best to spread it out and make sure that it covers the whole canvas. But if you're doing this project, I just recommend making sure you mix enough epoxy so you don't run into this problem. As long as the epoxy hasn't reached the curing time, you can continue to make more waves, or you can touch up the ones you already made. And for this project, I'm using appliance epoxy spray paint, but you don't have to use an epoxy one. You can use regular spray paint that is satin finish, glossy. It doesn't matter. As long as it's not metallic, it will work. And this is what it looks like 24 hours later. Now keep in mind that this is not the main technique that is used when you do resin waves, but it's a technique I use because I was using leftover epoxy, so I was pressed on time on the curing time of the epoxy. So I needed to find a technique that was quick and easy, and that way I wouldn't waste all of my extra epoxy. So this is something that you can do if you just want to make a quick project. It works out. I think it came out good overall. Here I'm showing you the defects since I didn't use enough epoxy. It did have a spot there that didn't fill out, and I also found a hair that dried up on there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and sand that hair out, and then I'm just gonna do another pour on the whole thing. Now doing a pour on the whole thing is gonna kill my 3D looking effect of the waves at the very top. But that's okay. I'm just gonna do one clear coat on top of it. Epoxy resin is self-leveling, but here I'm using a small trowel to help it level a lot quicker, and it'll also help me see any low spots, because the last pour you saw that it had a spot that didn't get the resin on it, so I'm making sure I don't have that problem again. And now I'm getting rid of the bubbles using a small torch. And just a quick safety tip, if you're using spray paint or alcohol on your epoxy resin project, just make sure you don't torch right after you use the spray paint or the alcohol. You have to wait a few seconds for it to settle down and then you can torch, because alcohol and spray paint are both flammable, so that can be dangerous. So just wait a few seconds and then you can torch. When it gets close to the curing time, you want to start wiping off the drips from the bottom of the canvas. But if you want to have no drips at all, you have to come back about a couple hours later after the epoxy resin starts curing, because at that point it has stopped dripping. So you want to get them after it has stopped dripping completely. And one last tip, once you are done with your work, make sure you cover it so it doesn't get any dust or hair. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you can watch more of my resin projects. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to write me in the comments.